First to cry.
Okay, I'm here to make a. I'm here to make a special introduction. I'm here to make a special introduction to a special guest that I brought in. I originally came to East Palestine. Was going to come out 2 trips to do testing at the request of some residents that reached out on Twitter. This is my 21st trip and the 25th round of testing. And I want to make to set this up. My second trip, Sam Beresford, who lives across from the Figleys, from Marilyn and Bob, his father, who passed away recently, Ken Beresford, was driving me around on a golf course. The sun was setting, and he says, "When are you coming back?" And I said, "I don't know, just coming out twice." And he goes, "No, you showed me around that night with the sun setting." And I posted a little tribute on Facebook. He said, "Scott, you and everybody else that have come out have made me believe in humanity again." And I said, "You know what? Spending the day with you, Ken, made me believe in humanity again." That's why I'm stopped. I mean, I've literally stopped my other businesses, and I'm not giving up this fight. And I can tell you, in over 60 disasters, the people in this room, people beyond this room, have made me believe in humanity again, and that good can triumph over evil, and truth can triumph over fraud. And I'm here for the direction. And I just want everybody to know that this community, I've never seen a community as smart as this, as committed, and as stubborn as this. And I'm pretty stubborn, so I feel like I am right now. But with that being said, also government accountability project, I wouldn't be able to continue with the EPA, and I have hashtag Bring It On, EPA, the Norfolk Southern, PR people, all that stuff. They can keep going. But Leslie Pacey, who reached out to me, she's in the back. She has a sign-up sheet. Government Accountability Project reached out to me, and they've got a team of lawyers. The EPA has been sued for the Freedom of Information Act. And the question is the EPA has an open invitation for me to test side by side. I still do. And I'd be the first to say, point out what I'm doing wrong. They say we accept Scott's results. We don't see a need to test side by side. And then for them not to comply with the Freedom of Information Act request, and she can get you the lawsuit, what do they have to hide? And then the third thing is affected residents that are reporting health symptoms, the EPA won't test their property. So what's up with that? You can't find what you don't look for. So, and then I thought in talking to many of the residents and Krista and everybody, I reached out to Marilyn Leisner, the last Times Beach mayor, and I got to tell you want to talk about a leader and helping you in these fractious, divisive times. People can come together, and the good guys are going to win, and the truth is going to prevail. But with that being said, Marilyn has really been an inspiration to me, and I'm just starting to get to know her and her leadership and wisdom from 40 years ago. And you're going to hear it's eerily familiar, the health symptoms and other things. So with that being said, I'm pleased to introduce Marilyn.
Sorry to be here like this, and I wish this room was so full that all of you were here that are missing, because your safety in numbers. At Times Beach, 93% of the people fought for a buyout. There was just a small number that did not. And I don't see the big numbers here, which is important. Times Beach was a very small community, some 27 miles west of St. Louis. We were situated with the Merrimack River on one side, the railroad on the other side, and Interstate 44. In 1982, a local reporter called our city hall and said that he saw Times Beach on a list of sites suspected as having been sprayed by a waste oil hauler with dioxin. As soon as we heard that, of course, we were contacting the EPA, and all of a sudden the EPA had set up a meeting. On November the 11th, I was coming home from work and I was listening to the news, and the Corps of Engineers was reporting that people that lived along the Merrimack needed to move things out or prepare for flooding, and it would be a bad flood. December 5th, as the floodwaters were coming into the community, we had found a lab. The EPA told us at one of our meetings that they didn't have a lab that could do the testing for the chemical, and it would take 10 to 12 months. But fortunately, having talked to the waste oil hauler, he told me the name of the lab. We gathered the money by selling city stickers that said ignorant is $10 a piece. That was the name of the trucking company. We managed to sell enough of those city stickers to get $2,700. The problem with what we did was we only had enough money to tell us the dioxin was there, not to tell us the levels. But when the EPA realized we had a lab, they contracted our lab also. So when the water was coming up on December 5th, their people were testing for the chemicals as well as ours. On December the 10th, I received a call from the lab telling me that there was a problem with the spectrometer, that something was jamming the spectrometer. And I asked her what would do that, and she said there was only one thing that would do that, and that was PCBs. So there's a chain of command that I had to follow. I had to notify the governor's office first, so I called the governor's office. He asked me to get the numbers, and I called the lab back, and they said the PCBs were 50 parts per billion. And of course, at that time, the Missouri DNR told me that was a safe level. On December the 13th, we reviewed to our residents that the dioxin was there, but we couldn't tell them how much. On December 23rd, the state of Missouri and the EPA held a meeting in what used to be our city hall with some of the residents that had moved back and were living in the community. They instructed those residents that were in town to get out, not take anything with them, and the people that were out of town not to come back. It was difficult to leave what we had worked so hard to earn, but yet we had to consider the safety of our children. I left the community in a boat with my daughter and our little dog. My husband, we were going out. We were in his John boat, and it looked like the water had stopped running this way in front of our trailer, but it was going backwards. So I thought that it was going down, so I said I wanted to get in the boat and go see the damage that it had done to the community, because at that time I was an alderman. My daughter decided she wanted to go, and we put the dog in the car. We were going up Maple, and there was a pallet company across the highway, and there were pallets floating. One of those pallets hit the motor on the boat and knocked the forward gears out. We got landed up against one of the homes up the street. My husband finally got the motor going. We went out in reverse. So we safely got out of the community. The water came up 4 feet in 45 minutes. And as we were going out, I was concerned about what was in that water that we were going through. After all of the water started to go down, we were allowed to go back in the community on Thursday. You can see here, this gentleman is rebuilding the inside of his home, not knowing that we were going to be bought out. We had voted ourselves out of the flood insurance program, so we couldn't go into temporary housing under the insurance. People were staying with friends and neighbors, and two of the local Holiday Inn let us stay there for free. Then on February the 22nd, we received a visit from Ann Burford, who was in charge of the EPA at the time. Ann came there to tell us they were going to buy us out at fair market value. We were concerned about what fair market value would be, but we soon learned, and this is our visit. She stayed behind the glass doors. She wouldn't even shake my hand. But we did learn that there was going to be a buyout. It took several months for them to hire an appraiser. The state contributed 10% to the buyout, and the EPA 90%. After the buyout, they sued the chemical companies that were responsible for the contamination. Of course, they couldn't sue the waste oil hauler because he didn't have anything that they could take. So he kind of got out of it. But the flood damage to the homes was major. When the first offers came out in June, the offers were low, as you can see. So the residents spray painted the offer on their home with newspaper reporters. After that, myself and the other aldermen went to Jeff City and we had an appeals process set in place to where if the people were not happy with the first offer, they could get a second offer. And they would get 10% more money. And then there was the second appeal. After the second appeal process, if you didn't accept the money, you went to condemnation. There were very few of the residents, only 7% of the residents went to condemnation. In July of that year, we had not been able to have Christmas in December, so we celebrated what we called Christmas in July at a city park in Eureka. All the residents got together. We had this was our Santa Claus, it was our Santa Claus in Times Beach. We had Lou Brock, some of you may remember the Cardinal ball player Lou Brock, who came to spend time with us. He brought his Brock umbrellas and gave people Brock umbrellas and different things. We were concerned about our pets as well because they were out in it. One man found birds in a drainage ditch along the road in front of his house. The birds were dead. He called the Missouri Department of Health and they told him to collect the birds, freeze them, and they would come and get them. He did that for weeks and nobody ever did come to get the birds. There was another incident where there was a dog. They thought the dog rabid in a ditch alongside the road. They called the police department, and of course we had to approve the killing of that dog because they thought the dog was rabid. At that time, not knowing that there was something in that ditch that was killing that dog. There was a cat that a best friend of mine had. The mother cat, the 5 kittens died. The mother cat died. We were seeing a lot of that. There were no rabbits in the community when we would drive through the community. You know, you see rabbits. There were no rabbits in the community. And when I asked a lady from the Missouri Department of Health about the fact that there were no rabbits, she said it's because they're so close to the roads. The dioxin was killing the rabbits. And another thing that was happening was the snakes would eat the rats, and then the birds would eat the snakes, and we were finding wild turkeys and vultures dead along the riverbanks. And it took a long time to get everyone relocated. The final offers went out in something like 1991 because of the people that went to condemnation. And you can see where they painted dioxin on the roads. This lady was the first mayor's wife. The first mayor worked for Monsanto, and he was really in trouble with the press. I mean, the press was just, I've never seen so many press people in one place. But he couldn't handle it all, and then he was wanting to rebuild his house, and since dioxin wasn't harmful, he resigned. And the chairman of the board took over as acting mayor, and I moved up the ladder to being chairman of the board. That mayor and his wife were fighting. He didn't want to leave the community. He wanted to stay, and you could see signs on the highway that said, Mayor Hammer doesn't speak for us. His wife ended up leaving him. They got a divorce. 2 months later, he was locked up in a motel room in the Days Inn. He was wanting to kill himself. Fortunately, the police rescued him, but he did end up divorced. As the acting mayor, when he resigned, I moved up as acting mayor, and the people behind me moved up. In 1985, we had to have an election. Since we were going to be bought out, we had decided we didn't need to have an election. But there were the 7% of the people who wanted an election because they wanted those that were in office who were supporting the buyout out of office. So we had to, government said we had to hold that election. We held that election, and in June of 1985, I was elected mayor of Times Beach. I didn't want to do it. I begged my husband because we were already out of the community and in temporary housing and we could move on with our lives. But people were calling my husband and they were concerned about those that were in charge that didn't want to be bought out. And I supported that buyout. So my husband, when I came home one night crying and all upset because I didn't want to do it, he said, "Marilyn, if you'll do it, I'll run for city marshal and we'll do it together." Of course, my husband got more votes than I did. Anyway, then in 1985, we had no money. We couldn't work as a city anymore because we weren't getting any tax money. We had no residents to pay taxes. So the state of Missouri asked us to disincorporate the city. So we signed papers to disincorporate the city. At that time, Governor Ashcroft and Senator Bond appointed me trustee to see the buyout to the end. So I was asked to tell you this. All of the people that I served with at that time are gone. I'm the only one left. And for some reason, God sent me here, and I think it's because I'm here with you people today. My message to you is you need to be united as a community. You're going to have those people who aren't going to want to be bought out, but the more numbers you have to approach the EPA and the President of the United States, you people need to put pressure on those people that are in office today, because you need to be removed from the threat. There is no safe level to dioxin, and you have other chemicals as well. So what I would like to see is the unity of all of you to ask for a buyout. We were compensated fair market value for our homes, up to $15,000 relocation supplemental assistance, moving money. We received grants, and if our home was not paid for and the interest on our home in Times Beach was $2.85%, and it was going to 5 or 6 in the new home, the government paid interest differential for the term. There was a lot of money out there and help, not just from the federal and state government, from people outside the community. We received 250 pair of shoes from a factory in Texas. We were given heaters for the people that wanted to go back and rebuild their homes, so they could, these little gas heaters in their homes to dry out their homes. And I guess I'm here today because when I first read about this and talked to Krista, I remembered some of the things that we went through at Times Beach and how sad it was for our people to experience this. Not only were they had just been through a horrible flood, many of them had health problems.
You can all find that slide about your health issues.
That was Lane Jumper.
Yeah, let's run through these real quick.
I'm not good with the press, so and back then I was horrible. So I appointed someone to be my speaker, and I basically tell him what to say. He did a great job. The president put a committee in place, and the first time they met in Washington, D.C., and he told them everything that was going on, that committee was stopped and never met again. We never did know why. We received help from all over the world, but we had to do things to make the government see that they had to remove us from the threat, because at that time there was nothing available, nothing chemically to clean up the dioxin. And we were going to be in temporary housing for years until they could find something. They set up some plots in Times Beach to do different tests of chemicals, and one of the plots was turning the dioxin. This man would go in twice a day and turn the dioxin in all three plots, a control plot, another plot, and the actual plot. And at the end of the 3 months of testing, it was learned that it would take 100 years for the sun to degrade the dioxin in that community. And when they knew in 1974 that Times Beach was contaminated, but they did nothing. They thought then that the sun would degrade the dioxin, it would go away, and we would not have to be relocated. But with that test, they learned that the dioxin was there forever. They cleaned up Times Beach. They cleaned it up to 20 parts per billion and covered it over with 6 inches of clean fill. And they turned it into a state park. You can visit the park. You can't dig in there, and you can't spend the night. They lock it up at night and they unlock it in the morning. A lot of the residents do go back from time to time. Every year they have a reunion in September in the park for the former residents of Times Beach. I want you to show them the town now.
So there's the park.
This is Route 66. This is the only building left standing, and it was out of the floodplain. It was called Steiny's Inn, and the EPA said, the chemical company, EPA, the state of Missouri, and myself, we all had offices in that building. This is what we call our town mound. Everything that was left in our homes is in that mound. We didn't. The greatest majority of us took nothing out. We left it in our homes. And they bulldozed the homes, and everything's in that mound. The water tower. Water tower. That's sad. Yeah, we wanted to leave the water tower, but they weren't going to leave our water tower. It's also in the town mound. They didn't tell us what the levels were in the homes, so there was a group of attorneys representing some of the people who decided they wanted to test, so they approached the federal and state government and asked if they could go in and test some of the homes. And their answer was no, so they sued. And when they went in to test, what was happening was the government was telling us that there was no contamination in the homes because they were testing the mud in the homes. The mud that was in the homes didn't come from Times Beach, it came from upstream. And they were telling us that there was no contamination there. But when these attorneys went in to test, they tested above flood level, like up above your door or your window. And in those homes, they found anywhere from 1 to 7 parts per billion. At that time, Dr. Renata Kimbrough had set 1 part per billion as a safe level. But today, there is no safe level. They tell us there's no safe level to dioxin. Everything that was in their homes, all the homes, everything is in that mound. It's the size of 5 football fields. We tried to get them to put a monument on top of it. But when the chemical companies were sued by the state and federal government, one agreement that they signed off on was that there would be nothing in that community or on the highway that showed that that was Times Beach. They wanted to get rid of the stigma of the dioxin.
Marilyn, we talked a little bit about the health symptoms, the seizures, the fever. If you could address that, because it's eerie how it mirrors the health symptoms that we've been hearing about here.
I've seen, in talking to some of you, I have seen some of the same symptoms and health problems in some of you that I experienced with my friends and neighbors. And I've not talked about this publicly except to Scott, and at one time I had to testify in Washington, D.C. about health problems, about my health problems. I had excessive periods. They were every other week, every 2 weeks. They were horrible. And I finally went to a doctor who put me in the hospital and did a complete hysterectomy. He found 7 tumors, some other things that he removed, and I had what's called endometriosis. They fed the rhesus monkeys dioxin, and the rhesus monkeys developed endometriosis. One of my daughters had endometriosis, and she was told she would never bear children. My youngest daughter had developed a seizure disorder, and the seizures were horrible. We put her on different kinds of medicines, and nothing controlled the seizures. There was a doctor that I met, Dr. Bertram Carnow, who was very familiar with Vietnam veterans and their health problems. And he told me the medicine that they're giving her doesn't work. Nothing is going to work on those seizures. The medicine is just going to make it worse. So her seizures were uncontrolled for a long time. My daughter Tammy, I worked in a doctor's office. Her pulse was just, she was like this. Her eyes were bugged in her head. She had a growth here. She had a goiter. She was diagnosed as having Hashimoto's thyroiditis, and they kept her in the children's hospital for 5 weeks until they could get her regulated, get her blood pressure down, and she had to take medicine for 3 years to get her thyroid back to normal. My oldest daughter, every time she would go outside, her nose, her mouth would swell, even with her nose, her eyes would swell shut. She would break out in hives that covered her whole body. The rashes, she had to start up chloracne, and the rashes were just horrible. I see those in some of the pictures that I've seen. I see so many of those health issues among you people. And the problem that we had when the people were going to the doctor to be treated for some of their health conditions, the doctors didn't know anything about dioxin or what dioxin cost. And so they couldn't, all they could do was treat the symptoms. And I'm sure that's happening here as well.
Yep.
This was my first husband. He was the road commissioner for a short while. If you look at his hands and his face, his doctor couldn't tell him what was wrong with him. So he sent him to a doctor in the city of St. Louis, a doctor that had just been appointed as the doctor for the city of St. Louis. That doctor diagnosed him with porphyria cutanea tarda. That's a condition that the Vietnam veterans are being compensated for. He died. He actually bled to death internally. They did operate on him to try and find where the blood was coming from, but they couldn't find where the blood was coming from. He bled to death. They offered the Missouri Department of Health and the CDC offered him $300 to let them test him. And he talked to his personal injury attorneys about that, and the attorneys advised him, no, don't let them test you because they'll use it against you in court. So there was nothing they could do for him. They told him to avoid the sun would make the skin worse. At that point, there was nothing that they could do for him or nothing he could do to make himself better or to heal himself.
Pregnancy problems and birth defects or anything like that?
We did have one man that had to have both breasts removed. He had cancer of the breast. The chemical attacks the hormones, the thyroid, the female hormones, the male hormones. We saw a lot of men with prostate cancer. You had a question?
No,
I got breast
he had breast cancer. He's being treated for it now.
So you can see from this that the residents of East Palestine are experiencing so much of the same thing as the residents of my community.
The difference with East Palestine is they had a mayor that would stick up.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have nothing like
We have nothing.
Yeah.
We have no city politics.
And just to clarify, Marilyn, we don't live in East Palestine. We live in Darlington Township. We live about 1.5 miles from here. We're 3 miles from the site.
And the soil at this facility is 350% higher than background for dioxin.
Yeah. And he's already had a double mastectomy.
Marilyn, do you think that they would have acted so quickly had the flood not occurred? Do you think the flood was a big catalyst for them acting to help your community?
Well, there were people outside the community who said they were only buying us out to get us out of the floodplain because they knew we wouldn't move. And that was the truth. We would not, had it been flooding alone, Times Beach would be alive and well and healthy today.
We have a president that can't find the time to come visit. He can go to Vietnam, but he can't come here.
The buyout was because of the health problems.
Did they ever tell
If
you?
I could jump in, we have a hard stop at 6. First of all, a lot of media was invited. Is any media here? Thank you for showing up, and I think any questions, because I think the media, you're hearing the narrative out of the EPA, you're hearing the narrative out of the railroad. Thank you for showing up. We understand the extreme pressure the media is under with the lobbyists and the PR. I want to make this is a fact. Norfolk Southern spends $1.5 million per year. 80% of their lobbyists are ex-government officials. We're going to try to find out who they are. There's a lot going in the background, so for this community, the appreciation and respect for you showing up. We know a lot of media was pressured not to show up here today.
That's one thing. What I'm seeing is Norfolk Southern is buying the residents and the officials. I mean, a nice big city park, concrete streets, and those people that have been relocated, they needed to relocate everybody. Under Superfund, relocation is something that they would have paid for.
The media, the two representatives of the media, do you have any questions for Marilyn?
We talked earlier.
Okay.
No, I'm good, thank you.
She's okay. So,
He has my phone number, you can always call me.
I have a question, Scott. Did the EPA acknowledge your ailments and your symptoms, or did they try to tell you it was psychological?
No, what they did is they put a man in our temporary city hall who got there at 7 in the morning and left at 7 at night and documented everything that he saw and heard. They never acknowledged any of the health problems. But at that time, Reagan was president, and there was times with what was going on in the EPA. Rita LaBelle, who was second in charge, was shredding and tearing up documents. She went to prison. And of course, Reagan, I guess, thought that if I buy out those people, it'll make things look better. So fortunately, that was on our side.
I think our problem is our town, there's just too much division. And the division is nasty, very nasty. There's the people, you might have one house that is completely empty, and then the house next door, they're putting up Halloween decorations, and it's
I
just
saw
like,
that as we
and
went through.
it's so bizarre, and it's just very sad that this is what our community has come to.
Makes me wonder, what am I missing? What am I missing?
Our officials at Darlington Township are telling us everything's okay.
Yep.
You got nothing to worry about. Nothing to worry about.
Until
Because
the
the
health
EPA, the EPA's pushing that narrative.
Right.
Yes, they are.
CDC, you know,
Jake.
we can't cure it, but we can treat what you get from it.
One thing that I was told a few weeks ago, and I asked this question after talking at some length to Krista, I asked an attorney that represented some of the residents, what's going on here? And what he said was that the dioxin is so prevalent in our community that there's no way they can clean it up, and there isn't enough money to clean it up. So they're trying to avoid the issue.
That makes most sense I've heard yet. Right there.
Excuse me,
Yes.
Yeah.
Heritage Valley Hospital was told,
I'm sorry, I'm a little hard here.
Heritage Valley Hospital was told not to test any.
So was Mercy Health there. The CDC, we have a video of asking one of the local doctors to write a prescription to test for vinyl chloride. And they were told that, or we were told that a memo was sent down from the CDC telling them not to test for vinyl chloride in our system.
They don't want to know.
Right,
Right.
that was it. They said that it should be gone from our system by now. That's if we were only exposed on February 3rd.
Dioxin stays in your system for 7 years.
Yeah.
That's the life of the dioxin use. And it turns into something else, and you pass it on to your family.
It's generational.
Yes. And if you be kind of loud, I have
Yes,
in your
I'm a loud person anyhow. My daughter got pregnant, about the time, like in December, and her baby, it was 8 weeks early. I mean, late, early. Did anything like that happen to
Yes.
women?
Right
Really?
next door to me, there was an infant born with all kinds of health problems. I mean, it was sad. The infant lived to be 2 months old, but we saw a lot of miscarriages. My daughter had a
Did you?
miscarriage.
I mean, she had the baby and he's doing good so far, but it's just like 8 weeks early.
I can tell you
She
some
wasn't
of
too
the about
good.
babies too, that have happened since the environmental conflict.
Okay.
She said she knows a couple stories about
What's wrong too, like
You look
that?
kind of familiar.
Well, no, I moved there in '86 and lived in Ballin, so
Oh,
I
okay.
kind of was,
Away from the hazard.
right, but heard about all of it and it was down, and I remember driving past it and
There were 28 sites in Missouri. I saw somewhere where it said 27. There were 28 sites in Missouri, and those are the only sites that they knew about. There are still sites out there, but those were the only sites the truck drivers could remember spraying. Those were the only sites that Judy Pyatt, who owned the stable, saw when she followed the Bliss trucks. So there are other sites out there. One thing Russell Bliss told a couple of his drivers was to go along the shoulder of the road on Interstate 70. The driver drove the shoulder of the road, opened the spigot of his truck, and unloaded everything on the shoulder of the road. There are sites, there's a site over in East St. Louis, Illinois, where there are barrels, where Russell Bliss took the barrels. He stored the chemicals, the waste, in Frontenac in a big tank.
Marilyn, talk about this map. The streets.
This is not one of the newest or the best maps, but the red shows the highest levels of dioxin in the community. You can see, this is the community that was contaminated. This is the interstate, the railroad tracks, and the river. One thing that they did when they were doing the cleanup, they tested the sediment in the Merrimack River, and they found dioxin in the river, chlordane. They posted signs up and down both sides of the river that said, limit consumption of fish from the Merrimack River to 1 from Lima.
Marilyn, I have a question. Would you reach out to Michael Regan or help us reach out?
I'm happy to call anyone, but they won't return my calls. I've tried. But if you'll give me the name and phone number, I'll try.
I will give you his assistant, Rosemary. That's the head of the EPA, Michael Regan.
Well, we were just in a EPA office downtown. I was angry because I saw that small child and 3 school children carrying their books coming home from school, walking on those streets. I couldn't believe that they're allowing that to happen.
My daughter's boyfriend, 18 years old, was in Palestine only for school after the derailment because I would not bring my family back to my house. And he went into our home to feed the bearded dragon, and he is 18 years old with vinyl chloride in his urine. There are children, Jamie's nieces, younger than him that have it. And we're being silenced, and then by our community too. We've had things, I've had a ton left on my porch. We've been through lots of things.
And I think we're getting the answers. They're just not the answers we want to hear.
I will tell you, Patty Connor across the street from me, there lived a family. The father was a Vietnam vet. Their first child was born with what's called neuroblastoma. The child died at 4 months. And they went to different doctors and said, what is the possibility of us having a second such infant? And all the doctors told them, your chance of having another infant like that are 1 in 300,000. They had the second infant, and it was also born with neuroblastoma. 8 years later, the father died with neuroblastoma. There were a lot of children born with birth defects.
When we try to call the doctors currently, I found that I have some lumps, 4 of them.
One thing,
The doctors, as soon as you give your information
the doctors,
to your Burmese LSC, they don't call you back.
most
I
of the
can't find
doctors
the
don't
doctor
know.
this evening.
The doctors don't know what dioxin causes. In the early newspaper articles at Times Speech, there was a young man who raised a family down by one of the chemical companies. His son had knots and lumps all over his body and of course he didn't live, he lived to age 12 and passed away.
Marilyn, we're experiencing a lot of division in our communities right now. So my name's Hillary. I'm a part of Unity Council, and we're seeing a lot of division. A lot of people very angry about the people speaking out. And I was just wondering if you had any advice for how we keep going when we're bashed every day.
In fact, I had to have police escort for a little while, 2 different meetings that we went to. And when we appointed the young man to the committee, the presidential committee, one lady came into our temporary city hall, and of course she didn't want to be bought out. She yelled at me, she put her finger in my face and said, "He don't represent me, neither do you." And she slapped me. My attorney.
I don't think anyone wants to slap any of us here.
Our police officers is working for Norfolk Southern.
Yeah, but that's exactly what we've been told. The same thing is, you don't represent me. Of course, like they said, nobody's gonna slap us in the face because, yeah, it's all over social media, but.
It's a different
slap.
There is Alan Shaw of Norfolk Southern. And then flanking him on one side is Keith Drivik, the fire chief, and on the other side is our mayor, Trent Conway, shoveling dirt to break ground on, correct me if I'm wrong, it's the Norfolk Southern training site, is that right?
Yep.
The second in the country, the other one is located in Colorado. So if they're gonna put that here, there's no danger here, there's no problem. But the beautiful thing about the training site is it's
They are
temporary.
trying to
Nobody
impress you
lives there.
people that there's no problem.
Exactly.
Here's the picture.
But that's who represents us. That's who we have to go to. We have nowhere to go with these concerns and being taken seriously. The problem may not be today. It may not be next week. These problems may develop, these health issues, in 5 or 10 or 15 years.
The longer you're there, the more they're going to develop. In fact, early on, the CDC told us that we wouldn't be seeing any cancers for 20 years, but we were already seeing cancers.
And how long, at what time scale would you say you
Even
started seeing?
before we knew that the dioxin was there were some very rare cancers.
That's a very short period of time.
Yes.
Isn't it? Yes.
Actually, the streets were sprayed in '74, but they didn't tell us. If the reporter hadn't have found it on a list of sites, we would not have known. They finally told us in 1982, only after we knew.
For 12 years they kept it.
Yes, yes.
And 12 years being the EPA kept it. That's
Right.
the agency that we're leaning on, and we think they've got our best interests at heart.
I don't know what you could do, and I've thought about how. Scott and you people are what they need, publicity. We did a demonstration on the highway. We actually took protective clothing that was provided to us for going into the city and respirators, and to make a good showing. We put that stuff on and we wrote on our white suits. They took the trash and left the people. Mayor Hammer, don't speak for us, buy us out. And when some of the men went up on the interstate with the respirators on, we got a call from the Missouri Department of Health, and they sent the highway patrol to make us take those respirators off, because there's a certain way you use a respirator, and they can be dangerous if you don't use them correctly.
Sounds like something they would tell us.
We had in excess of 100 people on the interstate, walking up and down the interstate.
Chase, Chris, that's a man's job. That's what she just
Can I
said.
say something? Marilyn and I have been working together for about 10 years. I did my PhD dissertation on the children of Times Beach, when they were children at the time, and I interviewed the former residents when they were in their late 40s and 50s up to this point, and what was their experience like. And Marilyn and I go around to different colleges and to the high schools, and we give this presentation to bring the awareness to the new generations that have never heard about Times Beach, the experiences. But what I wanted to suggest to you, if you would allow me to, and Marilyn and I have talked about this, right now, the declaration of a national disaster has been on the desk of President Biden now for months. And yes, last week he wrote that executive order, which is a step in the right direction, but what you really need is the designation as a federal disaster. And so one of the ways that you can do that is to continue to put pressure. Come together as a community, including those of you that are on the other side of the state line. You got to figure out some kind of organization where you can be represented.
We have a petition. We have a petition. It has over 16,000 signatures from around the world.
That's it.
If you want to sign it, please come up to me today. I'll pull it up on my phone.
Yes. And one directly to President Biden, especially. And somehow, and I think you have one representative, Vance, that seems to be picking up the advocacy, so that's what you need to. But Marilyn and I are here to help you in any way, so just get in touch.
Can you tell us a little bit about what you found in the study of the children?
Okay, so my youngest person was 8 years old, and that she described the day that the EPA came with their spacesuits on, and they're waiting for the school bus, and they're kind of wondering what's going on. And of the 90% of those that I interviewed, I asked them the last question, which was, consider yourself to be a survivor or a victim? 90% said, we're survivors. The one person that said they were a victim, this person really is still very sick. He has stomach cancer. I think, is he about 59? Is he about 59? Okay, so anyway, his hands are still wrapped. You know, he started out with that chloracne, and over the years it has just continued. It's bleeding. He's got his hands covered and so forth. There was one individual that I interviewed. He works for the old Monsanto. It's now Mallory Bond, but he's saying, "Oh, everything's great. You know, I didn't get sick." Now his mother passed away with cancer, correct? And his father. Yeah, they just passed away recently. I think another thing, and Marilyn alluded to this, when the kids had to go to school, the Eureka schools, again, the teachers would separate the kids, and they weren't allowed to go to people's houses, you know, to have to.
One of the things that came out on a front page newspaper article was that chloracne was very contagious. And the people that didn't have children living in the community were concerned that their kids were going to catch something from our kids. So the teachers separated them in the schools.
And so the most common health issues that these individuals that I interviewed now as adults, you know, it's the ones that were on that list, you know, autoimmune diseases, cancers, skin ailments. Nosebleeds, oh my goodness, still. So.
And I will tell you that when I got out of the car in East Palestine, I was not out very long. I got very dizzy and headachy when I got back in the car. So there's a problem, and I cannot believe that this community that has 4,000 people is not highly represented here to hear. And I'm thankful to Scott for the work he's doing. It's important that they know the levels of exposure that's here. You people need to be removed from the threat.
Yes.
And not by our whole country.
When we took you into the EPA office today, what did the EPA guy do to you?
He threw me out, didn't he?
Oh.
He walked away and went in the back room. I said to him, "Why are you letting those children walk the streets?" And he said, "With their parents." He wasn't concerned because it's okay for them to walk the streets as long as the parents are with them.
Well, they did it the week after the derailment, and the minute they brought people back, it was business as usual. Those kids were walking the streets before Norfolk had even attempted to clean up. They literally covered up the tracks with gravel, started running the trains again. Those kids are walking across the tracks going to school.
Throwing rocks in the creek to see the pretty colors of chemicals coming up.
One thing that I see that's different here is, it's just been this many months. We lived with it from
Right.
1971 to 1982 before we finally knew about it. So there were already health effects. You people are just now experiencing those health effects
So
from
they
your
have a chance to
exposure.
make it right, and they're choosing not to.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And they get to rotate out. You know, that guy that threw you out or walked away from you, he's only here for another week and a half, and then he's gone. You know, these guys get rotated out. They don't
Norfolk Southern told me it was to keep them fresh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you
Keep
can
them fresh.
unite your friends and
Exact
neighbors.
words.
That's something else.
Sue and I have 15 pages of documents of things that happened there. If we can help you with any of that, we've provided some of it to Scott and some of it to Hank. It's a list of a lot of the health problems. One thing that really helped us, that put a lot of government on our side, was the fact that we found out they were lying to us. They told us that the levels were less than 100 parts per billion, but it took 2 friends in the Missouri Department of Health who were sick of it going on and on and on. They just wanted it to come to the front and something to happen. One of them was a vet to protect the animals, and the other one was a doctor. So they anonymously gave us the test results showing 1,200 parts per billion as opposed to 100 parts per billion or less. So they were not being honest with us.
What did the doctor do, Scott?
Yeah, this is not directly comparable, we don't have enough time to get into it.
Okay.
The EPA is using
Okay.
the TEQ, we talked about this last night. This can be addressed separately.
And Scott is doing it. I'm really concerned about his level and his nosebleeds and his red face. He's out there putting himself in harm's way to try and help you people. And I don't know what we could do or what you could do as residents to encourage other residents to support you, but that's a bad thing.
I know.
Actually, 2 of my bosses with the Department of Natural Resources, one of them was the director of the Department of Natural Resources, and one of them was the attorney for the Department of Natural Resources. They both passed away this last year with lymphoma, and it starts with this cough. And then I got a call from a reporter who reported everything that was going on there, who was in and out of the community for 12 years. He's now going through chemo and radiation for lymphoma.
Marilyn, what's in the animals? I was watching a video, like the horses, the livestock, the cows. When do they start having the
Immediately, yes. My daughter and I were driving through Times Beach one day, and a squirrel fell out of a tree onto my windshield. She was dead. The rabbits, there was no rabbits in the community, and I was driving through the community, riding through the community with a representative of the DNR. And I mentioned it, and she said, "Marilyn, it's because they are so close to the ground and the contamination."
Yeah.
Well, if
We
that
have
really
5 minutes,
mitigation-
there's a question back there. I think.
I don't have a question, I just want to let folks know that we're here from Case Western Reserve University. We are conducting a study, and maybe some of you have already been aware of this study. It's with the Case Comprehensive Cancer Center, and I'm here with one of the researchers of that study, and we want to be able to.
Who is also a resident of Mahoney County, by the way.
Yeah, and so if you have if you guys want to be part of the study, I should say, please come and see us afterwards.
And I talked to Dr. Schumacher about it, and this is, they're doing it from the DNA perspective of how the chemicals affect your DNA. So it's different than Dr. Galam and different than Dr. Haynes. And actually, Dr. Schumacher will be at an event we're gonna hold on October 16th via Zoom to explain a little bit more about it. But Unity Council also has that data sheet that has information about the study on it. So if anybody, I don't think there's an issue with other studies, right? You can be in more than one study, because all the studies are kind of doing a different take on it, so. And I think she has some little flyers with her if anyone wants them.
Yes.
How far away from this is far enough?
Yeah.
Real,
When I don't know, I say I don't know. I don't, you know.
I mean, is there any
The
guesses?
The EPA has the resources to test and answer that question. I'm doing what I can, but I'm not gonna even guess and jeopardize someone's life.
So what's the furthest out that you tested?
I'd have to look as a map. There's Pennsylvania. I did controls in Salem, Ohio, but that's for controls. But we've been over in the Pennsylvania area. I can get back to you.
The night that they did their controlled burn, we live probably 7.5 to 8 miles outside the area. We live up on the hill, Shenango and Fall Front area. A big black cloud came over top of us and look at that. I mean, because we're outside of the 5 mile now. It was 1 mile, now it's 2 miles. But we were inside that black cloud when they burned it. Wow.
It rained at our house for 3 days, and we had air tree in the backyard, and it was in full bloom when they burned it, and I told him we're not eating anything off of that tree. Nothing.
Well, it's approaching 6 o'clock. We've got somebody here speaking of trying to get the word out. I'm not gonna say who's behind it, who you're talking to, but you wanna say something?
Hi, my name is Tessa Hobbs. I own Hobbs Production. We're here videotaping today. However, for me to get this word out, I need your permission to use your likeness and use your voices to help get funding for this so we can get promotion. So Bruce, my partner here, is going to go around the room. If you do not want me to use your likeness and do not want me to use your voices, raise your hand. Anyone. You do not want to be on camera.
I cannot.
Okay? Please state your name so we have it for the camera.
We're in a class action, would that have a?
It would not. We're using this to try to promote, to get funding to get the word out and to, I mean, this is not being vocalized in a large enough manner. I mean, everyone's trying to shut you guys down. Our goal is to blow this across the nation. So if you please stand up, state your name, and say, I do not want to be used on camera.
My name is Billy Burchett, and I do not want to be used on camera.
Anyone else?
My name's Rita Latina.
No, wait, let me get you on camera so I can at least make sure I cut you out later. Or block you out. I don't want to.
I am behind East Palestine Unity and everybody 100%.
We understand.
Yeah, we know.
We understand. We understand.
Who is your? That lady
Me, Rita Latancio, because it's about my daughter, and I would rather her talk.
Okay, and you do not want your likeness on camera. Thank you.
Can
Anyone
you
else?
cut my arms out?
I forgot how to do that.
Not on the face. You can sculpt them. Yeah, right.
All right, thank you, everyone.
Hey, excuse me, Marilyn has a closing remark, and then we'll wrap it up. Go ahead, Marilyn. Closing remark.
There's so much I can say. There are so many memories, and I see so much of time speech here in this room. My heart goes out to all of you. I don't know what I can do, but I will tell you, you need to put pressure on your president. It will take an order from him to the EPA to act, to put you in temporary housing, and to make the decision to buy you out. They'll pay for your temporary housing until they acquire your property. You need to get the community united to do this.
Should we take our stuff with us or not?
We were told, if you're in town, get out, don't take anything with you. If you're out of town, don't come back. We didn't take anything with us. It's all in that mound that you saw.
If anyone wants to sign our petition, it's actually over 17,000 now, and that's to President Biden to do the major disaster declaration. Come see me in the back.
Well, thank you, Marilyn.
Thank you.